Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Trinity Continuum panel that we're doing here today now. I'm much better prepared now than I was for the Mage panel earlier. This is good. So, hi, I'm Ian A.A. Watson. I'm the Trinity Continuum content lead, so I'm the person who's sort of generally in charge of the whole shebang. And with me are Eddie.
Hello. My name is Eddie Webb. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the executive producer at Onyx Path, and basically I help Ian to make sure the books go. And I also was a developer on Anima.
And Steve.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Kenson. I was lead design on Trinity Continuum Aberrant, and I've done some freelance work on some of the upcoming Aberrant projects as well.
And Vera.
Hi, I'm Vera. Pronouns are she, her. I've been a freelance. Oh, I'm getting an echo here.
Yeah, you might want to mute the stream.
Oh, geez. I'm sorry. Where's the stream at? God, I'm sorry.
Yeah, whoever's got the stream running in a tab, make sure it's muted.
Yeah.
I don't have it running in a tab. Okay, sorry. Hi, I'm Vera. Pronouns are she, her. And I've been a freelance writer and now a developer for Onyx Path for a while now, and I've written for several Trinity Continuum products. I worked on Aberrant, I worked on Adventure, I've worked on a bunch of Aeon supplements and some Aberrant supplements, and I'm developing one now.
So the Trinity Continuum is a big place. So far, we've released, the core rulebook, obviously, and Assassins to go alongside that. We've done Aeon in the far future, Aberrant in the near future, and we've got a whole ton of stuff that's coming out. We've got Anima set in 2084, which is our cyberpunk lit RPG game. We've got Adventure, which is the final part of the original trilogy, set in 1934. And we've got Ather, which is our 1895 War of the Worlds interdimensional shenanigans thing coming up.
Shenanigans.
Yes. Well, I mean, Matthew's doing it. Could it be anything other than shenanigans?
It's dangerously close to hijinks.
Yes. Hijinks is a little bit later in the timeline. You're sticking to shenanigans here.
Right.
And we've got obviously a ton of supplements for all of those coming out. Most pertinent for our purposes is the whole bunch of stuff coming out for Aberrant. There's like a whole laundry list of stuff that's currently on the production list. So why don't we go in reverse order of how we enlist ourselves, and let's talk about some of the stuff we're doing. Vera?
Okay. The supplement I'm developing currently is best at what I do. It's kind of a love letter to the solo Nova, and especially elites who are usually operating alone or in very small groups. So we cover a lot of the details of how the elite business model works. What kind of stuff they're likely to do. What that side of being a Nova looks like. It's not all the glitz and glam. It's kind of like the nitty gritty. You don't have backup. You're not a part of like Project Utopia, or you don't have a bunch of friends in the Terrigen you can call upon. If you're in a tight spot. But not just like the paramilitary end of things, but like all military terminology, the term elite is kind of leaking out into like the general parlance, and so you have elites who are IT security elites. You have elites who will run your political campaign for you better than any baseline could, and so on and so forth. So a lot of a broadening of the term and of what you can do as an elite. We're also including some details on how to run like a solo Nova campaign centered around one Nova, as opposed to like kind of the standard team up model that small groups are more likely to run with. And you can do that either as like a one Nova with like the sidekicks and like the hangers on and the other associated characters. You can do kind of a round robin thing. We have a lot of options for story guides to stretch their wings and do something a little bit different. And some new mechanical, support for like how one Nova can really get out there and change the world, and things like that. Real like one person against the world kind of stuff.
Cool.
Very cool. I'm curious though if it has all the, like self inserts about all the terrible ways that things can go wrong when you're a freelancer.
We're still in first draft, so I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Steve, what you doing?
So let's see. Right now, I'm working on a chapter from the Shadows, which is all of the fun spy espionage elements of Aberrant. In my case, that's fleshing out and detailing the directive a bit further for the book. Lots of folks are also working on lots of other agencies and organizations that are involved in tradecraft in one way or another in Aberrant. And so there'll be whole shadowy organizations gathering information and keeping an eye on people and things like that. Prior to that was working on detailing Project Utopia and Team Tomorrow more for the With Great Power book, and building out some more detail about how Team Tomorrow works, who's on the teams, what their different sort of regional responsibilities look like, things like that. And before that was an adventure for Nova Worldwide that involves the characters in some involves the characters in some trouble between elites and Terrigen and politics in Florida.
Nice.
Great.
Florida man.
What are you working on?
What am I working on?
Yes.
So I'm still doing the stretch goals for Trinity Continuum Anima. We had a fun Kickstarter for that, especially that's was a little nerve-wracking because that's our first new Trinity thing aside from the core rulebook. But people I think really got the cyberpunk lit RPG crossover stuff. So now we're doing the something called DLC. And that was basically some more stuff specifically for the fake MMO side of the game. So we actually have a whole MMO that you can play inside the game. So you make anima characters, and then they actually make up characters to play in this MMO. So we added some more new material for that. And when we sent it up, used the original kind of calculations for our word counts. And Rich was like, I think there needs to be more here. So we're doing another round of writing to add some more material there. So it's going to have a whole bunch of new material about different mysteries inside the world of anima. It's also going to have some things like how to do raiding with different groups. So basically our large scale combat, more information on quests, and doing epic quests and epic boss chains. So when you have like a multi-stage boss and the like. So and also there's achievements. So when you get achievements in game and what those mean to you as a character. So if you really dug that side of the game, you can have a lot of more meatier material to play with. And then also doing the 2 jump starts for anima, because it's such a game of 2 halves by design. We realized that we could not cram all of that into 1 jump start and get it across to people on an easy level. So we decided we're making one that is set inside the MMO itself, and you play through a whole adventure using your MMO characters. And then there's another adventure where you are actually running around the city of Cascade and trying to solve a mystery. And they can be played separately, but also there's some pieces that if you want to play them in sequence as a connected adventure, you can.
One thing I really loved about the Kickstarter that we did for Anima was so many people were unsure on sort of the basic idea, like, okay, yeah, maybe, your MMO is going to be detailed, but I don't think that leaves enough detail for the city aspect, or maybe they argued the other way around, where they weren't sold on the MMO idea, but the city was going to be fine. And almost universally, the reactions we got were like, oh no, this is really great. Either half of this can be run as a full campaign by itself. And so it's essentially 2 games in one, and we managed to cram it into a single rulebook, which it's delightful. I'm really excited about Anima, and I hope everyone else enjoys it too.
Indeed. And I mean, some of that was strategic design, like for the fact that you only play talents in Anima. And so we could use the Trinity core rulebook to kind of offset some of that. So it's like, well, what do you do in cyberpunk games? Well, lots of heists. Well, we kind of cover heists in the core rulebook. And it's like, you do espionage action stuff. Well, we kind of do that in the core rulebook too. So it did free us up that we didn't have to spend as much word count as opposed to like say Aberrant, where it's okay, we have to establish all superhero stuff,
Right.
That requires a lot more room. But I mean, if you're basically doing leverage, but with cyberware, it's pretty easy to kind of just add that bit on. And then we had room, and we specifically stripped down the MMO stuff to be, kind of much more, we want to feel like a video game. So it's like, I beat stuff up and I take their money and I get up and level. I mean, you don't have to spend a lot of time establishing a deep, nuanced mechanical system, but so we have room for people to kind of try and doing cool things.
Yeah. And as I recall, the system that we came up with, or that Danielle came up with for the Animas, is essentially the mini game from Nova's Worldwide. Nova.
NWE Unleashed.
NWE Unleashed. I'm trying to remember what NWE stands for. It's International Wrestling Entertainment.
International Wrestling Entertainment. Yes, the wrestling sub game. Because again, it's a similar thing. It's like, we want that wrestling to be very contained to the ring, and we were able to kind of extrapolate that to, okay, well, the structure of a wrestling match is kind of similar to the structure of a quest line. So I was at Danielle, here's what I did for wrestling. How do we kind of expand that out? And she did a fantastic job of expanding that out to make it fun to level up. And there's cool things like, I'm going to grind here. Cool. Roll your grinding roll. Great. You got 2 successes. You get 2 levels. Here's some gold and you move on. There's great ways to zoom in and out of that extrapolation.
Right. And we've got a question here from Josh asking, can you tell us more about the way supplements are being designed for 2nd edition? They have a similar but different style from the 1st edition books from what we've seen so far. So unpopular opinion, the 2nd edition is the D20 edition. What we're working on is the 3rd edition. I try to stay out of that argument altogether by just calling it the new edition or the Trinity Continuum edition.
Right.
Everyone else calls it 2nd edition, but not me. So I can't answer your question because we never put out adventures for D20 version. Next.
Dodge, weave.
Yep. Actually, Eddie, since you're more involved on the production side of things, is that a question you could answer about how we sort of create the structure?
Yeah, sure. So basically kind of how it works is first we figure out the core book we want to do. And that's really kind of the basis. We want to make sure that core book can stand on its own. We assume we will have, I mean, with the exception of the potential lines like Aeon, Adventure, and Aberrant, we knew those were going to have a couple support books, but every other game, it's like, okay, we need to make sure that stands alone. Then after that, we look at, okay, what could we do? We don't ever want to do the original book we did before, but with different stats, right? I mean, that's no fun for anybody. There's a lot of reasons why we don't, part of which is that this is essentially a reboot. And so, Aberrant has changed pretty significantly. Adventure has changed pretty significantly. So there's reasons why I can't actually do that. But the other piece is also the market has changed pretty significantly since the early 2000s. Back then, a slim book coming out every couple of months was very much the business model. And that's not what sells anymore. What sells now is people want a substantial book, and it may take a year to kind of get out. So we, some of that is we take stuff and kind of bundle it together. Sometimes the small targeted things, like for example, the wrestling supplement, that was something that Matthew and I pitched, surprising absolutely nobody. And it was because that was such a huge part of 1E, but Rich was like, I don't want to have a bunch of wrestling supplements. Like, cool, we'll just cram it in one book, make it a stretch goal, have fun with it. And Rich was happy with our pitch there. But like say for Aberrants, we knew there was a lot of support for Aberrant, but also something that I remember we talked, Steve, you brought up was that how we view superheroes has changed so much from the 90s. We don't do deconstruction anymore. And a lot of the stuff that we were trying to fumble around in 1st edition is basically, like the Marvel movies. We can just kind of point to that and go.
Right.
So that changes what kinds of stuff we can talk about in those books. So yeah, I think I hope that answers the question.
I think also, speaking as a freelancer, who's worked on a couple of supplements, that the style of just the way things are written and presented has changed a lot from the way things were done in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so folks who have seen the style of the existing Trinity books have a sense of what the supplements will look like as well, because they follow that essential same model. And so they're not presented in quite the same way as the original books were.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, because of that style, I think also allows us to expand and explore things like the Varus book. I mean, we did an elite book, but we kind of expanded that to do more of the, okay, but what about Wolverine, Batman, and the Punisher? That's kind of in the same space, right? I mean, you're able to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, even in first edition, the Gothic Knight, who was sort of a Batman plus Spawn, he showed up like right on the front cover and sporadically in illustrations throughout, but almost no detail was ever written about him other than his name, and never got stats. So it's nice to be able to take the opportunity to sort of delve into some of these characters who have been around in some cases, over 20 years, that, the fandom knows about, but knows nothing about.
Absolutely.
All right. How much of the backstory from the original version of Aberrant will make an appearance in the new edition? I was a big fan of the intrigue behind the dissolution of Team Tomorrow and the underground Aberrant movement. Is that going to be completely reworked? The new version of Aberrant came out a year ago, so you can pick this up and check for yourself right now. But to answer your question, I'll go for the basic rundown of the cascading changes. The Aeon Society and therefore Project Utopia are no longer shifty bad guys who, have a nice public face but are evil underneath, which means Proteus is no longer murder happy, which means Slider no longer gets killed, which means Andre Corbin is no longer framed for her death, which means the original Aberrants faction is no longer formed. So the Aberrants name is now used for a faction of the Terrigen, which is mostly Nova Vigilance and the Primacy, I think, from first edition. So they're the Nova Supremacists. And Andre Corbin and Sophia Russo and a lot of that lot, instead of being in the Aberrant subfaction, now they're working for a new faction within Project Utopia called Team Tonight. They're sort of the Black Ops version of Team Tomorrow. Anytime Team Tomorrow is sent somewhere, cameras follow them. Anytime Team Tonight is sent somewhere, it's specifically because they want to avoid any public notice.
And since we didn't mention this, if people are interested in how we reworked the Terrigen and those other factions to a bit, that's coming in the upcoming Hated and Feared book that Travis is developing.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is that the Aberrants are the Nova terrorist faction. All of the Terrigen are Nova supremacists.
That's a good point.
Yes.
True. So, more questions. We have a lot of questions. Wow.
Yes. When will we see Adventure 2nd Edition? Well, if you go to check our monthly release roundup, you can check the production status of any of the books that we currently have in development, and you can see where they are and get a rough idea of how long it's going to be until you see something. Stuff that shows up on there in bold is something which has changed since last month.
Actually, as you're looking at stuff, I want to touch on it a little bit because we talked about it in the opening ceremonies, but in case people didn't catch that, from a making books standpoint, the past year has been garbage, in terms of the industry. I'm not exaggerating when I say no printers had paper in December of 2021. That is a literal fact. There were no paper to be had for printers. Shipping was terrible for a long time, got slightly better, and then now oil prices have gone up, so shipping is back to being terrible again. Printers are still trying to catch up from the workload of the past year, which means that as opposed to before, where we could send a book to a printer about a month ahead of time and they'd get to it, now we have specific windows where they open to allow us to set projects in, and we're going to send so many projects before they close that window again to get back to printing. So we don't normally give release dates, but we would be even less likely to give release dates now because we're trying very hard to get everything out the door in a reasonable fashion, doesn't cause huge problems for the people who back these Kickstarters. So it is coming. It's definitely on the way. It's definitely in progress, but we can't give you kind of release dates for these things because it's particularly right now.
I think it was April or early May where we basically shipped 3 Kickstarters at once because we had finally managed to catch up a little bit on a lot of the production issues, which are completely out of our hands.
Right.
So yeah, there's like just picture like, I don't know, a tap with a cork in it and the pressure's building up behind it. And we can take the cork out every now and then and a bunch will come out and then the cork gets stuck back in.
Right.
So we're trying to get stuff out, but stuff is stopping us. And every now and then we can push a whole bunch of stuff through at once. And we're trying.
And multiply that problem across basically every publisher in the industry.
Yeah, it's not just us.
Yeah, because I'm sure
everyone.
folks at Green Marine are also having those problems too.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Eddie did a video with extra credits earlier this year called an extinction level event for the tabletop industry. And
Yeah,
I
it's
just
a subtle
linked
and
that in
nuanced take, let me tell you.
chat. So I just linked that in chat so people can check that out if they want. Okay. Who made the call to change the in-universe front rules back book format? So yeah, originally in Aeon and in Aberrant, the front half of the book was in glossy color and it had all the in-character stuff. And then the back half of the book had the black and white system stuff.
Yeah.
I don't recall that anyone explicitly made that decision. Maybe Rich did at some point, but this is just sort of the way we decided to do it this time around.
Yeah. Well, it's just another example of how books are just being done differently now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, 10, 15 years ago, it was very much the model that people wanted to sit down and read the book from front to back. And that was from what we did our market research, is how people want. So we want to make that book fun to read. Now, with heavy hot linking and people how they just consume their media, people are much more likely to flip to the rules section to see what they think of the rules and then ingest the background material later. So we've just been slowly adjusting and readjusting based on market forces.
We maybe get a historical book for assassins, like a book on assassins in prehistory, ancient times, Middle Ages, Renaissance. If you're asking if we're going to do an Assassin's Creed book, probably not. That sort of thing is probably going to be available for people to do on the StoryPath Nexus at some point. I'm not behind that, so I don't know what's going to be released when. But if you take Assassins and you take Anima, I mean, we do specifically mention historical reenactment servers in Anima. You basically have your Assassin's Creed game.
Yep. Almost like we planned that.
Yeah, weird.
There was one question I want more production side, so I'll field it real quick. We skipped over. Was can you tell us when Ather will start crowdfunding? The answer is no. The answer is always no. Because and it's not because we're trying to be jerks about it. It's we genuinely don't know. Originally, it was we didn't know when Kickstarter would say it was okay for us to move ahead, and now that has moved to we don't know if Kickstarter is going to tell us if we can move ahead. And also, we've been reassessing whether we want to continue using Kickstarter. We probably will, but a lot of things have changed, and so we're looking at new options. So with all those factors being up in the air, we would much rather give you a couple of weeks notice and guarantee that's when it goes live than say, oh, we're doing it 2 months. Oh, we have to shift it a week. Oh, it might be delayed. Oh, we had to cancel it. So we don't do it to be jerks about it. We do it because we want to make sure when we give you a date that it is, we can stand behind that date as much as possible.
Right. And another thing to consider is we try to have a complete manuscript before we launch our project.
Mhm.
So we can't say, yeah, we're going to launch this thing 6 months in the future because we don't know if the book's going to be done 6 months in the future.
Right.
Right.
Let's see. Any plans for more adventure/campaign material, particularly for Aeon, as opposed to background material? I'd love to see something more advanced than the Jumpstart adventure that shows this is how to do an adventure, or maybe an anthology showing a few different styles. Adventures tend not to sell terribly well, so we typically veer away from them, except in the case of Jumpstarts. We do tend to try to make an exception for like the anthology style things like In Media Res and Nova's Worldwide. So that's a possibility for Aeon, but there's nothing that's been kicked around in terms of like an actual book for that quite yet.
Right. That being said, we are recognizing that a lot of people like to just buy adventures through virtual tabletops specifically, where they can just click a button and get all of their resources ready to go. So that's something that we're looking at. We don't have anything we want to announce yet. We're still in the exploratory phase, but if we go that route, I mean, Trinity might be one area where we move into, but again, it's still early days on that front. You're muted, Ian.
Oh, sorry. I was unmuted and then I muted myself to start talking. Can you tell us a bit about how Ather characters differ from talents, mesmerists, stalwarts, etc.? I recall mention of Gogs and Magogs from last year's stream. How much do you think we should mention?
I think you mentioned a little bit.
Okay. Gogs and Magogs aren't talents or mesmerists or stalwarts. They're a different thing, although in a sense, for various reasons, their abilities do sort of mimic the way that that mesmerists and stalwarts function. Sort of. So it's not a one-to-one correlation by any means, but they draw their power from a different source, the Ather. And exactly what that is, I think we'll leave until the previews for the book start coming out. But it's a different thing.
That seems fair.
Any fun reveals for the future of Aeon? Besides mission statements, there isn't much on the horizon. Mission statements is our next big book. And we're not putting Aeon to sleep. I want to put that out there, but this is sort of the end of when you like there's a run of action figures or something like, okay, this is whatever they call it, like round
Waves.
one of waves. Thank you, wave one. So this is the end of wave one of Aeon, and then we're going to sort of reassess, look at how books are selling, look at what else we have on the plate, and then figure out what more books the line needs, because we filled a lot of the gaps already. Like there are a few niche concepts that might be good, but not a lot that requires a full book. So we're going to sort of think about that, think about what where the line could go in the future. So we'll see. But yes, I want to reiterate, the line is not dead. Just because there's a gap in the production schedule doesn't mean that we're canceling Aeon. But in terms of the future of the Trinity Continuum, Eddie, do you think it's time?
Yeah, I think it's time.
All right. Now, a long time ago, I put up a list of potential game lines I would like to do with the Continuum. Anima was among them. And there was another one that people really latched onto because it was the only other one probably that I had like given a name to. And I had to constantly remind people, this is not a real thing. This has not been approved. This has not been confirmed. It's just a theoretical thing I would love to do at some point. Well, it has been approved. It's no longer theoretical. People can start looking forward to this.
Ooh, nice. Logo pending.
This is just a temporary logo I threw together.
Right.
It's not anything. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, everyone can get excited about that. Start theorizing about what that could be, what that could mean, what
Right.
sort of fun you might be able to have. It's not going to be like full on fantasy, obviously, because it's the Trinity Continuum, but
Mhm.
it is going to approach the fantasy genre from a bit of a different direction. So, I mean, if you take the Terror Surge content from Anima and you take the stuff from Aegis, you can probably cobble together yourself a pretty decent fantasy game.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's doing the same thing like we did with both Adventure and Aberrant, in the sense of we're taking these genres and putting it through a sci-fi lens. So
Mhm.
Aberrant is definitely a superhero game, but it's very specifically a science fiction based superhero game. Adventure is pulp, but it's very specifically science fiction pulp.
Right.
So yeah, it's not fantasy in that sense, but you're going to be able to do Beowulf heroic stuff.
Right.
And actually, as you're looking at the questions, there was a comment in chat that I kind of want to address because I think this goes back to the how things have changed side of things. Sean Griff made a comment in chat about making things that promote the meta plot. Meta plot, for those of you who don't know, it was a concept that was very popular in the 90s and early 2000s. The idea that each book coming out advances the story that the previous books were trying to tell. And that's not something we're doing with the Trinity Continuum. There's no progressing story. There are certainly connections between games, but all of them are at a kind of a default day one for each of those starting points.
Mhm.
So obviously, Aeon is in the future of Anima, and Anima references some things that will eventually happen in Aeon. But once those pieces are put down, they don't move forward after that point. And we repeatedly point out through lots of different books that all of those are just a possible future. If you change things in Anima, you may not get Aeon in your particular game, and that's okay. It is a continuum, and there are lots of different options. So we're probably not going to put books out that say, well, now it's 5 years later, and Max Mercer has done this and whatever, and Divis Maul has spontaneously grown 12 more arms. We're not going to really do that kind of stuff.
Right. Anima is always going to be set in 2084. There's no going to be any 2085 books. There's never going to be here's the complete guide to the Shanghai Accords. Like that's not going to happen. Likewise, Aeon is always going to be set in 2123. So within each game line, it's just a day zero from the core rulebook onwards. It's only stepping back, looking at the overall continuum, that you can see a timeline, but we're not considering that timeline to be a meta plot per se.
Exactly.
Will the Talent Player's Guide expand gift creation guidelines? Compared to skill tricks in core or masteries in assassins, I found the core guidelines less helpful.
The answer is I don't believe so. We are going to have more gifts in that book. And so from that, you can probably intuit more guidelines. But I don't think there's going to be explicitly, here's how to make a gift, because we did kind of already cover that in the core rulebook.
Right. Can I say if talents exist in Ather? I can. But I won't.
But I won't.
Yes, but not in the way you think.
There you go.
For Ian, have I accomplished a lot of what I wanted when I started working on Trinity for Onyx Path? Honestly, I never thought I'd get where I am right now. Rich initially asked me if I wanted to do this over a decade ago. I wanted to put out new versions of the 3 original games, and we're doing that. I haven't quite gotten there yet with Adventure waiting. But I sort of wanted to expand on what already existed. And we got to do that with the core. We got to do that with Anima, which was the first big thing I'd started working on 8 years ago, I guess. And we've gotten to do more than that. And each time a new book gets approved, I'm delighted. There's some stuff I thought of back then that we haven't touched on yet, and we might never, and that's fine. We've hit a lot of the big notes that I wanted to. So if catastrophe happens, COVID-23 hits, I think I'm more or less satisfied with the game line as it exists. If I was forced to leave it here, I'd be pretty happy with what we've done. But we're doing more, so I'm cool with that.
There's always more.
Is Aegis different from Scion? Yes.
One would hope.
Yes.
They're different titles entirely.
Yes. Other than the fact that like Greek mythology is involved, sort of. Yes, that they're two completely different games. Scion is a modern day game where you play the children of the gods. Aegis is going to be set in ancient Greece. Scion is not. And there's no such thing as gods in the Trinity Continuum.
I mean, Max Mercer, but
Well, yeah.
Hey!
Supposed gods. Certain
not a
people
good
keep
one.
asking them.
And to anticipate a follow-up question, that yes, it's also different from They Came from Cyclops Cave because it's not funny.
Yes.
We'll see. Might be fun.
Well, okay. We have a very different, that's fair. We do have some pretty strong jokes in Trinity, but it's a very different style of humor.
It's more fun than it is funny.
That's a good point.
The Trinity Continuum team have done an amazing job with this news station. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
There was a question for the panel. What have you worked on that is something you're excited for people to read?
Honestly, everything we've got coming up has got some amazing stuff in it. I couldn't be happier with like all of our writers and our artists and our editors. We've got such an amazing crew working on the Trinity Continuum, and it's such a delight. Like I lay out the blueprints, and then people deliver me this something I couldn't even imagine at the outset. It's so much better than I could have designed. So just because I'm the content lead doesn't mean that everything is my responsibility, because these writers are so much more creative than I could hope for, and I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry for that. That was a non-answer, but
That's fair. How about you, Vera?
Things that have yet to come out. Well, there's Best at What I Do, which I'm developing and I'm writing a decent chunk of. I also wrote some stuff for mission statements, so look forward to that. Thing I'm most excited about. I think that is probably the system that for now I'm calling Archimedes Lever, which is, as I alluded to before, systems for designing for one nova to really make an impact, like inventing hypercombustion and completely shellacking the fossil fuel industry.
Nice.
Things like that, just like the little things novas do that like ripples in a pond just expand outwards and change things. And I just love designing subsystems in general. It's like my favorite thing to do. So I'm very excited for people to get that and just come onto the forum and be like, oh, I did this crazy thing and this is what happened in my game. And
Nice.
I like that stuff.
Yeah, that is such a fun element of Aberrant as a setting too. Because most superhero settings don't let you mess with the world like that.
Yeah, because that eternal status quo, right? It's like you can't.
Right.
DC has to reset every few years, but this is like no, we can just see where it goes.
Yep.
Steve, is there anything you're excited about you're working on?
So I'm excited for folks to see the expanded sort of setting material in the upcoming Aberrant books. But I have to say I'm most excited for folks to see the adventure content in Novas Worldwide. And I think it really provides some really fun adventures for folks to play with some interesting challenges and twists to them, but also some really useful examples for how to do adventures in Aberrant. So I'm really looking forward to having people get a chance to dig into those.
Absolutely. And for me, I mean, obviously, I'm super excited about Anima. We've already talked a lot about that, so I won't kind of recap all that. I'm just really happy that we could do something that fits really well in the Trinity universe, but also is a different take than all the other Cyberpunk games out there.
Mm-hmm.
But also, weirdly, I'm really excited about the fiction I worked on for the Adventure Core rulebook, because I pitched to Danielle. It's like all she said was, "I want to have a person of color as the main character for the fiction." And I was like, "Here's this obscure character from one Sherlock Holmes story that I want to use." And Danielle's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about, but that sounds great. Just do that." So I was able to put in my black female detective in there, who is also canonically accurate to Sherlock Holmes based on the timestamp, and that just makes me very happy.
Nice.
Lucy Hebron is amazing.
Yeah. This edition of Adventure is going to be something special. I think it's hard to top the original because it's easy to look at flaws in the original version of Aeon and the original Aberrant.
Mm-hmm.
They're wonderful games. Obviously, I love them because I'm here. But they have their flaws. Adventure is as close to a perfect one book RPG as I can think of. It was a tight book, and it was very, very well written. And then we were asked to do that but better. And that's a bit of a tall order. I really love what we put together. It's going to be up to the fans whether or not we succeeded in making something which surpasses first edition or not. But I think it's at least worthy of consideration.
It also has more Nazi punching in it.
Yes, it has 100% more Nazi punching than first.
Well, that's
edition.
one of the few areas where the original adventure book could be improved.
It's true.
That is
There's
true.
more Nazi punching.
No, originally, the concern between Bruce and Charlie Bates was they didn't want Nazis to be like a cartoonish, mustache twirling, standard evil villain. So
because white supremacy is gone and we've conquered it.
Right. They didn't want to sort of reduce the horror of the Nazis to just the cartoonish villains.
That's fair.
So they decided, like, okay, let's sort of take the Nazis out of the picture. Let's set it in the 1920s instead of the 1930s. And then the last 5 years happened, and I don't care if they're cartoonish villains. We want Nazi punching.
That was very early in the discussion process, if I remember correctly. It was like, so this is what we need to do. And I think we're all like, yep.
Yes. Danielle originally sent us an outline. Here's Adventure set in 1924. And I said, what if we move that up a decade so we could punch Nazis? And everyone's like, yep.
Yeah, let's do that.
I want to give people an outlet to punch Nazis, and I want to encourage people to punch Nazis via our game.
Indeed.
The Trinity Continuum is about being a hero and affecting change by going out and changing the world. And what better way than by punching Nazis?
Indeed.
And Matt asks, what media influenced each of you when working on your most recent book?
I can give you the official answers for Anima, and then I can give you the answer nobody wants to hear.
Is Anima our most recent book? I'm trying to figure out what's
for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I had more recent books after that, but no media really influenced them because for me it was coming out from Anima.
Sure.
I think it's for each of us, each of our recent books.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, I told the story before, but it's worth telling again. Initially, when I pitched it, basically everyone's like, oh, it's just Ready Player One. And I'm like, no, there's more here, but I'm having trouble finding references. And Ian's like, let me help you with that. And then we started adding media references. Then we put it to the anime team and they said, oh, let me help you with that, and add more things. That's why I learned the word isekai, to be perfectly honest. I was like, oh, there's a name for this genre. That's great. So, I mean, I was coming from it from a lot of the literary cyberpunk, William Gibson, Sterling, all the kind of early 80s stuff. And then extrapolating from there as opposed to some of the 90s and 2000s stuff. I mean, we put some bits there too. I know like Schwarzenegger movie where he goes to Mars.
Total Recall.
Thank you. I'm thinking the name. Total Recall was very early in Ian's pitch. And thinking that this is something we want to be able to do with this. And then obviously for the MMO side, there's like, we looked at World of Warcraft, but also I want to look at the new wave of Korean MMOs because that has really shaped how MMOs are portrayed in the same way that World of Warcraft shaped it when it first came out. But what you will not see in any list, because nobody wants to know this, is that I was also influenced by Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd century because it is garbage 90s cyberpunk and I love it.
So good.
Right? I mean, like it's
good.
Peak 90s crap cyberpunk. It does everything. Like there are drugs that are actually chips, and there are clones and people brought back from the dead because they're in honey, because that's how it works apparently.
And Watson's a robot.
Watson's a robot,
right, of course.
Also has a mask, and it's ridiculous, and I love it. And I felt like there needs to be just a tiny bit of that tech war, Shatner style 90s cyberpunk in there. So we have little bits and pieces in there, but it's very hidden under the actual genuinely interesting cyberpunk. Batman Beyond, yes. Someone else mentioned Batman Beyond, yes. In fact, although I will say my Batman Beyond reference is actually in Aberrant, and I got Ian and Steve to sign off on it. I put Shui in one of the scripts.
Yep, absolutely.
It's a little bit in there. So how about the rest of y'all? What kind of media influenced your recent books?
Well, for me, From the Shadows, it's all James Bond movies, of course, and like the Marvel movies, like Black Widow and Winter Soldier, and pretty much anything that have Agents of Shield, the entire series, basically anything that features Shield and Hydra and the whole notion of just shadowy super spies, working behind the scenes, against one another in one form or another. So and all the related comics and that sort of thing has been pretty much the main things for me for that book.
Digression, but I got DC Infinite recently, so much catching up with DC stuff, and I read Greg Rucka's Checkmate, and I was like, I should mention that. I should mention that for the book.
The whole Janus Directive story crossover in Checkmate is actually a great example of how to do an interagency conflict.
I did not realize 80s Suicide Squads was so like politically, espionage oriented, and that was so good. Yeah. Oh,
big time. Yeah. Ostrander's Suicide Squad, total great model for that as well.
Absolutely. Anyway, Vera, what about you?
All this, a bunch more that's out of frame. But specifically, I've been reading science fiction since I was a little girl, reading my dad's collection of Stanislaw Lem novels. So like, I'm all into that hard science fiction. I'm the girl they call when they want to ruin all the fun with like talk about tau factors and the Karman line and all that stuff. And that always works its way into whatever I'm writing. But for the most recent stuff, I have been slowly getting back into comics after some time away. And mostly like classic Jack Kirby stuff, like New Gods and whatnot, like just the really just the larger than life kind of like comic heroes of yore that can hold up like an entire story on their own, like their arc and like the people around them, as opposed to like and I say this with love in my heart, like most modern comics, it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna watch Spider-Man Far From Home. Here's Doctor Strange. Why is he here? Well, you'll have to watch, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness to find out.
Right.
Yeah, I say it with all of my heart, but that's not what I'm working on right now.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Again, digression. But you said you're getting back into comics. Are you reading manga at all?
Oh God, that's over. That's out of frame.
Okay, fair enough.
A little bit over here too.
Because you mentioned hard sci-fi, and I just started reading Space
Mhm.
Brothers about two astronauts, and it's so good.
Yeah, I have also been just a giant dork for manga and anime for a long time. So mine was Planet Test a long time ago.
Okay.
Getting back into the Carmen line, Kessler effect, and all that good stuff.
Right. Awesome. Excellent. So I think we have a couple more questions. We're getting close to time.
Why Westworld season 3 not official inspiration for anima? It's almost perfect there. I don't think season 3 was out when we started production.
That's part of it. Also, I mentioned before we started that we didn't have a lot of inspirations. By the end of it, we had, what was it, 50, 100?
All the inspirations.
So it was north of 50. Yeah.
Right. The list was so long, I had to cut it down because I had to write all the inspirations.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I was like, okay, here's the ones I've seen or read. Y'all give me some explanations of the other ones that I didn't know. Westworld was on there and it went back and forth, but I felt like it kind of overlapped. I was trying to shoot for diversity of influence, right? And I felt like Westworld was kind of, at least season 1 and 2, which talked about, kind of overlapped with Altered Carbon, a couple of other ones that I felt like was a little more zeroed in Cyberpunk specifically. But no, Westworld is great. It did come up several times during our discussions, so it was an unofficial inspiration for the games.
I'm curious, was Anima's development cycle such that the first season of Upload crossed over or crossed its radar?
Maybe. Well, that was 2020, right?
I think, yeah.
I think it may have just been coming out.
The whole 2020s are very vague.
So let me tell you a story about how Anima was developed. I pitched it. Well, okay, it was kind of weirdly jointly pitched. Ian had an idea. Dominic pitched a part of it, and then I had pitched a part of it, and kind of kludged it together in 2019. And then we refined it and we worked it through and got a really cool idea. And then said, "Cool, 2020, we'll go ahead and start working on this," not knowing that doing a game about being isolated in an empty city while trying to overthrow a fascist government would be super relevant in 2020. So it was kind of a weird moment where, like, we had some inspirational stuff, and it's like, that's actually too close. We need to pull back to get a little more fantastical. So like Handmaid's Tale was like pretty early on as inspiration. It's like, that's too on the nose. We had from that. Because initially we're like, okay, we have to sell people on this idea of what it's like to live in this environment. And it's like, oh, never mind. Don't need to do that anymore. That was a really stressful development cycle because there was a lot of stuff going on. But no, Upload's been on my radar.
Very early on, we had the discussion of like, okay, everyone loves the classic depiction of the giant skyscrapers in cyberpunk films. If everyone's working from home, do we need skyscrapers
Why are there
anymore?
Skyscrapers? Right.
We did come up with some
relevant
answers.
Yes.
Like, for example, one of our writers works in security. I won't mention the name. And they pointed out that a lot of times you have to like leave your computers in certain environments, and they're shielded, and the internet is very specific to that building. So it made sense that corporations would actually have complete facilities that you can't leave to make sure their information is secure. So it's like, okay, so that actually is a reason to have a skyscraper. But we did actually question that. It's like, let's start from scratch. Why do we need to do this? And then, we built back to, okay, you can't completely work from home, but you can do a lot more work from home than you did. Because again, when we first pitched this, the idea of a whole workforce that permanently worked remotely was a ludicrous, weird sci-fi concept. And now it's okay. We were in that, so we had to quickly adjust. Anyway. There's one more. Will there be a Star Trek-like book for Aeon?
I don't know what that means.
I was going to say Star Trek-like in what way?
Yeah.
Because Aeon is already kind of Star Trek-like.
Right.
We have Distant Worlds. We have Under Alien Skies.
Yeah.
We have Terra Firma. I mean, with the three of those, you can run pretty much any Star Trek game that you can think of.
Right. You even have transporters, sort of.
Yeah.
Teleporter rings, yeah.
Right. So.
Also, someone mentions John Hickman's Shield series as a good inspiration for From the Shadows, which I was like, I've not read that yet, but I should.
Indeed.
Because I just love anything John Hickman writes, frankly. But yeah, so we're close to time, I guess. Is there anything else that we need to cover? We did the announcements. We talked about our books. We answered questions.
Yeah, we hit the big notes, I think, unless anyone else has anything they want to plug.
Let's do that. We'll do the plugs and where people can find us.
Sure.
Steve, why don't you start?
Okay. So people can find me at S. Kenson on Twitter, which is usually where I'm ranting on social media. And I have a website at stevekenson.com, which is pretty much the links to my work and where to find me online and that sort of thing, and various things that I'm working on. So that's the main stuff, and check out.
Tell us about Twilight Accord.
So Twilight Accord, very briefly, is a Patreon that Joe Carricker and I are working on for Green Ronine right now. That is a queer-focused multiplanar fantasy setting that is about a community of queer folk from across the various planes who gather at the gates of the fallen first city from the dawn of time, where the being that may have possibly created the universe basically says, hey, if you can reclaim this city from the forces of shadow, you can have it as a forever home for your people from anywhere across the various planes of existence. We just need champions and heroes who can traverse this powerful dungeon and clear it out of monsters. So it's dungeon crawling in order to create a safe haven and home for queer people from across the planes.
Sounds amazing.
That's the brief elevator pitch. We're developing it on Patreon, so folks can get a playtest view of the game system stuff we're doing and the initial adventure stuff, and provide us with feedback. And we're looking to get more voices and more input involved in the whole process.
Cool. Thank you.
How about you, Vera?
I'm kind of a digital recluse, but you can find me on Twitter at Miss Bellwether, MSBELLWETHER. And I don't really have any outside projects to like really amp up. I am working on a novel, which is to say I'm rewriting it for about the fourth time.
That's about right.
That's writing a novel. It is, I'll say aberrant adjacent. There are superheroes involved, but it's not quite ready for prime time. So, if you're interested, just give me a follow and sit through all the retweets, and eventually I will say something. I promise.
Excellent. And you can find me at Pugsteady, PUGSTADY. My website is pugsteady.com. Aside from Onyx Path stuff, let's see. We've already mentioned I do occasional videos for the Extra Credits YouTube channel. So if you want to get an insight on how to design tabletop role-playing games, but with jokes and good animation, definitely a place to check out. Also, what else have I done recently? I just going through my index of what's NDA and what's not. It's always tricky.
Squeaks in the Deep just came out.
Yeah, Squeaks in the Deep. That just came out. So if you want to play psychic mice and rats in a far fantasy future, that's definitely a good supplement for both Pugmire and Monarch Use a Mouth. And wrapping up on the Squeaks in the Deep companion, which will allow people to play rabbits and also talk more about how rabbits intersect with mice and rats. So that's me.
Cool. And I am on the internet as Von Ather, VONAATHER, as listed down here. And as to what I'm up to, Trinity, Victorian Mage, and Trinity.
Trinity Mage.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, then I think we're ready to go. So Thank you all for coming. I'm sorry. Sorry. I took control of your panel. I apologize. You can go ahead and take us out.
I care.
Fair enough.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Thanks to my panelists here for joining me, and thank you to
Pleasure.
all of you for joining us as we talk about the Trinity Continuum. And I hope to see you getting excited about Aegis as we go forward in development with that. Thank you all very much.
Thanks.